Hi, everybody. Welcome to the presentation portion of Virtual Bird Bash. Our next presenter is Marianne Weber with the Houston Audubon, and she is the education director there, and she's going to be teaching us all about owls today. We're very excited. And this is a live stream, so if you guys have any questions for Marianne, you can just put those in the comments, and I'll be monitoring that, and we'll get to those in the end. So without further ado, welcome, Marianne.
All right, hi everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Thank you, GCBO, for inviting us to speak. Oops, I'm going to change my view real quick. And this is my friend Lauren, hi, who is with Camp Allen. I'm actually not at Houston Audubon's Education, Raptor and Education Center right now. I'm at the beautiful Camp Allen in Navasota, Texas for our annual Birds and Blooms weekend. And Lauren has so graciously brought over one of their education raptors that they get to teach with on a day-to-day basis. And I'll let Lauren introduce our barred owl friend.
Yeah. So this is Ollie. He's our barred owl here at Camp Allen. And he's been with us for 6 years now. So Ollie was given to us, and all of our birds here were given to us because they can no longer be released into the wild. So Ollie's story, he was found underneath a telephone pole wire, so we think that he was maybe electrocuted, and so he can no longer survive in the wild, and he is solely for education now.
And he does a great job with that. And just like the birds that we teach with at Houston Audubon, as Lauren said, they're all disabled, and they have a great life in the education field, helping to inspire folks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about barred owls during the program. There's certainly an owl species that's common in this part of Texas, and an owl species that in the right habitat, you can attract them to your own yard. So thanks for bringing Ollie by. And I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to dive into the world of owls. All right, so I call this Prowling for Owls. And if you're ever in the Houston area, in the wintertime, we do owl prowls, and we'd love to have you guys join us for some evening owl prowls on our properties. All right, so let's go. So around the world, if you had to guess how many different species of owls there are, I want you all to kind of take some guesses, thinking about the owls that you're familiar with around your hometown. When I first started learning about owls, scientists thought there were about 140 species worldwide. Now they know there are closer to 250 species of owls. New species have been discovered over the many years, and species that they thought were the same have been separated thanks to DNA research. So about 250 found all over the world except for Antarctica. And owls come in an amazing variety of shapes and colorations and sizes, inhabiting just about every type of habitat on planet Earth. And I love owls. They really are amazing creatures. And Cornell Lab of Ornithology has some great resources and great information about owls that I would encourage you to go check out. There are some basic owl shapes that you can learn that will help you identify your local owls. There are the barn owls with the heart-shaped faces, shorter tail, but very distinct shape to their face, long legs, worldwide distribution. We have the round-headed owls like Ollie, the barred owl that you just met, that don't have feather tufts, and of course the tufted or horned owls, and both of these can come in large and small sizes, but of course the horned owls have those distinct feather tufts that aren't horns on the top of their head. And the very unique hawk owls or boobuks, the northern hawk owl will be our example here in North America. And it's an owl, even though it's called a hawk owl, just to be confusing for everybody. All right, so when we think about owls, if I was giving this program maybe 50, 60 years ago, there would be a lot more people who would be fearful of owls. Myths and folk tales have spread across the planet for hundreds of years, and unfortunately, owls have been on the list of bad birds or bad animals. Their nocturnal activity, their very haunting and sometimes scary sounds that they make have caused myths and folk tales to be spread, making them the bad guys. And in many parts of the world, people were fearful of owls. They felt that if you saw one or heard one, you were cursed, terrible things would happen to you. So for many, many, many years, owls were persecuted and people worked hard to get rid of them. Up until the 1970s, in this country, in over half of our states, you actually got paid $5 for every dead owl that you brought to your game warden. They weren't fully protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act until the 1970s, just like our other raptors. So thankfully nowadays, we really like owls and we understand how beneficial they are to the environment. So there's this two sides to their, to what people used to think about them. There's the scary side, that they were bad luck and evil. And then the flip side is that they were a symbol of wisdom. Now, if you ask ornithologists, what are the smart birds? They're going to say the ravens, crows, and the blue jays, the corvids. So how did owls get associated with wisdom? Well, that began a long time ago in ancient Greece with the Greek goddess of wisdom, whose name was Athena. And when the Greeks built the temple for Athena, a little owl, this one called the little owl, moved in and started nesting on the facade of this temple. And the Greeks would see this owl every day. And of course, owls with their forward-facing, very human-like faces, forward-facing eyes, human-like faces. This became her mascot, her symbol. And she was not only the goddess of wisdom, she was also the goddess of war. She was always pictured with her owl. Her coins always had the owl on one side and Athena on the other side. So this was a very important part of ancient Greek life, so much so that when the Romans conquered Greece, they adopted the owl as the symbol for their goddess of wisdom, whose name was Minerva. So since ancient times, owls have been associated with wisdom, even though in today's world, they certainly don't make the list of, smartest birds. But I'm going to explain why I think they're so smart in a little bit. As I mentioned, nowadays people love owls, and if you go to Walmart or Target or any store, you're going to see stuff that you can get with owls on them, thanks in part to Harry Potter and other popular books. But they have these great human-like faces and almost these wonderful personalities, whether they're sleeping, whether they're wide awake, smiling, yawning, or maybe they had that all-important meeting at the office. They just have these great personalities, and to see an owl in the wild becomes a very special moment because so many of them are nocturnal. Not all of them, but so many of them in your neighborhood are nocturnal, so they're a little bit elusive. They're not as easy to go, it's not easy to go out birding and find them on a regular basis. So they're special. They are predators. They are in the group of birds that we refer to as raptors. And the word raptor comes from a Latin word. It means to seize or grasp. Like the hawks, the eagles, the falcons, they capture their prey with their powerful talons, and then of course eat their prey with their beak. And when we think about owls, we think about birds that eat a lot of mice and rats, but they eat a whole host, a great variety of prey items, all kinds of insects and invertebrates, amphibians, reptiles, fish, many different types of mammals and other birds. So depending on the owl and their habitat, they can have a great variety of prey on their diet list. And they are an important part of the food chain or the food web. As birds, they are warm-blooded creatures. They get their energy from their food. And like birds, they have a great need for food, high metabolic rates, and they have big appetites, like this little burrowing owl, maybe caught more than he can chew, not that they chew. And I think they also like to snack. This little guy's practicing his hunting techniques. But they're all important no matter where they live. And I'm going to use the example of the barn owl. Barn owls are mouse specialists. And in the old days, like I said, people were fearful of owls, and barn owls in particular were heavily persecuted by people. I think people thought they were ghosts and witches, spirits from the dead. And when people got rid of the barn owls, of course, their prey exploded. Their population exploded. Mice and rat population grew very, very quickly. One barn owl over 10 years can eat 13,000 mice. You take the barn owl away and those 13,000 mice over 10 years can eat about 150 tons of food. But as you know, those 13,000 mice are going to multiply very quickly. And eventually, they will run out of resources and food. Diseases and starvation will work into their population. And because they're mammals, they can spread those diseases to us. So back in the old days when the predators were persecuted and gotten rid of, the owls, the hawks, the coyotes, the bobcats, the foxes, all of a sudden the prey population became huge and diseased and unhealthy. And that spread diseases to people like the plague. So finally, people realized that the predators need the prey for food, and the prey need the predators to keep their population healthy. There has to be a balance out in the natural world for everything to work together. So luckily for us, the owls are fully protected now and appreciated. There's a great variety, as I mentioned, of owls across the world, and we are very fortunate that here in Texas, we are home to the smallest species of owl, the elf owl. But there are a couple really cool runners up, the long whiskered owlet of Peru and the Eurasian pygmy owl. These are tiny, tiny owls that can fit in the palm of your hand, just like that. In the world of owls, females are larger than the males, and a big breeding elf owl in West Texas or down in the valley is only going to be about 1.5 ounces. 1.5 ounces, that's like the weight of a letter that you get in the mail, which is pretty amazing. In the wintertime, they retreat down into Mexico. These elf owls are cavity nesters, but like many birds, they are secondary cavity nesters. They don't carve out those tree holes. They let the woodpeckers do that, which is why I think owls are super smart. They don't have to build their own nest. They recycle or reuse what's available to them. And in elf owl habitat, they will reuse these cavities left behind by ladderback woodpeckers in big saguaro cactuses or in telephone poles. That's where you will find them. And being small, they have a high-pitched call. So hopefully you guys can hear that. Kind of sounds like they're laughing at us. That is the call of the elf owl. Now, the largest and heaviest owl in North America is the snowy owl, but there are some runners up. The great gray owl that we have here in North America is the tallest. If you measure the owl from the top of its head down to the bottom of its tail feathers, it has really long tail feathers. It's taller than a snowy, but it's not nearly as heavy. The owl with the widest wingspan is a really cool and endangered owl called the Blakiston's fish owl that actually walks into rivers in Japan and Russia to get fish. And the heaviest of all is the Eurasian eagle owl, found all over Europe and Asia. But let's take a look at kind of our biggest, the snowy owl. This is not an owl that we get to really enjoy down here in Texas very often, only occasionally, but it is an amazing owl and a very popular one, again, thanks to Harry Potter. Snowy owls have a couple cool behaviors or adaptations. They nest, of course, way up north, close to the North Pole on the Arctic tundra, all around, circumpolar, around the North Pole. And the Arctic tundra doesn't have any trees, so the snowy owls nest on the ground. And the oldest, most experienced males will get up to their territories first to secure their territories when there can still be some pretty rough winter weather. Like millions of birds, the tundra provides plenty of habitat and resources. In the summertime, the sun never sets for almost 3 months. So they hunt day and night. You can hunt 24 hours a day under the Arctic sun, raise your family very efficiently. When there's a lot of prey, the snowy owls love to eat this small rodent called lemmings. If there's an abundance of lemmings, they can have a lot of kids in the nest. If when the adults get up to the Arctic, they kind of survey their territory and they realize there's not a lot of prey available, sometimes they won't even nest. They'll skip that year. But in good years, they can have quite a lot of youngsters. And being a big owl, they have kind of a deep voice. See if I can get this to play for you. Oh, that's their squeaky sound. And this is their kind of what I call their coughing sound. This is a map showing the distribution of snowy owls all around the northern hemisphere. And when they have those really good years, when they've raised a lot of kids, we have a much better chance of seeing them way down here in Texas. Those are called eruption years. We had one in the winter of 2013 and 2014, and there was a snowy owl hanging out like on top of a discount tire up in North Texas, and all the bird watchers drove across the state to go and get pictures of the snowy owl on top of the discount tire. Non-eruption years, they tend to stay in the northern 48, especially in the Northeast, Pennsylvania, New York, the beaches of New Jersey, Wisconsin, those are great, Minnesota, those are great places to see snowy owls in the winter before they go back up north for the Arctic summer. And I mentioned earlier that females are larger than males, so this is a good comparison. And with snowy owls, the males lose those black spots on their feathers as they get older, and they become pure white. The females will keep those spots their whole lives, helps them to camouflage when they're sitting on the nest on the tundra, incubating the eggs and waiting for dad to bring food back to mom. So it can be a big size difference. And you can see in this picture, those feathers that cover them all the way down to their talons, their feathers covering their beak, all to protect them from those very harsh weather of the Arctic tundra. All right, so we looked at the smallest and the biggest. Let's look at some of their cool adaptations. Obviously, owls have to have incredible eyesight. And owl eyes come in a great variety of colorations, from deep orange of the Eurasian eagle owls to the bright yellows of great horned owls, creamy colors, dark brown like you saw with the barred owl in the beginning of the program. So a great variety of eye colorations, but they all have one thing in common. They are packed with two special kinds of cells, rod cells and cone cells. And their eyes aren't eyeballs like ours. They're elongated. So inside their tiny skull, they can accommodate very large retina. And their eyes are packed with rod cells. They have cone cells for seeing color like we do, but we have more cone cells. Owls have more rod cells, and rod cells enable you to see in dim light. So the owls have many more rod cells than we have. And so their night vision is incredible. They can maneuver through their habitat without bumping into anything. Their skulls are really tiny, and those huge eyes are held in place by a ring of bone called the sclerotic ring. So as most people know, owls don't move their eyes. They have to move their head. But their eyes are not completely staring straight ahead. They do have a good field of view on the side. But when you're using both eyes at the same time, that's called binocular vision. That gives you really good depth perception. So we have really good binocular vision. That's this kind of grayed out area right here. That's really important for predators to pinpoint the location of your prey. Of course, for animals in the wild, they also want to be able to see what's going on around them, monocular vision or peripheral vision. For birds like an American crow that might be a prey animal, or if we think about a pigeon or another small bird, they have to be able to see what's going on around them all the time to protect themselves. So different orientations of their eyes enable them to see a little bit differently depending on what kind of bird they are. And owl eyes are huge. If you look at the outline of the skull, huge inside those skulls. Very light sensitive eyes. At night, the pupil opens up huge to let in as much light as possible. back to those very sensitive rod cells at the back of the eye. They can't move their eyes. So again, they have to be able to turn their head. And we have 7 bones in our neck. Owls have 14. And there's kind of an old wives' tale that an owl can spin its head all the way around. Well, it can only go about 3/4 of the way around, 270 degrees. If it did a 360, its head would fall off. But it can go 180 and further over 270 degrees upside down. Sometimes they look very strange. This probably helped to spread more myths and folk tales that they were possessed or scary back in the old days. And when they're turning their head that far, they're not cutting off circulation to their brain, which is also really important. They have, if you've ever seen or taken pictures of birds or cats and you get that eye shine back at you, there's a special area of cells in the back of the eye that when the light comes in and it hits those rod cells, it's actually, when the light comes in, when it's going out, it bounces back and hits the rod cells again. So they get twice as much light sensitivity compared to our eyes, which is really cool. Again, if they're going to be flying through the forest, they need to be able to avoid obstacles very easily. Like all birds, owls have 3 eyelids, upper eyelid, lower eyelid, and the 3rd eyelid that's see-through, called the nictitating membrane. And this membrane that all birds have is like having a pair of safety goggles. When they're flying, they can easily wipe their eyes back and forth, keep their eyes moist and clean, keep debris out of their eyes. When they're swooping down to catch their prey, they'll close that 3rd eyelid. That protects their eyes from sticks and grass, whatever is on the ground. Very, very important. But while they have that 3rd eyelid closed, they can still see what's going on around them. When you meet my owl at the end of the program, you'll probably be able to see her flicking that 3rd eyelid, the nictitating membrane. And that's a characteristic of all birds. Now, if you're hunting after dark, a lot of the prey that you're going to be hunting for is really good at hiding. So the other trick up an owl's wing, so to speak, is their hearing. When I was little, I always thought those were owl ears on the top of their head. Those are just tufts, feathers that owls can use for camouflage or communication. They have nothing to do with their hearing. Their ears are located on the side of their head, just like yours and mine, behind their eyes, underneath all those feathers. They don't have an external part to their ear like we do, so they can't wear earrings. But if you peel apart the feathers, you will see this huge hole on the side of their head, their ear opening. And instead of being right across from, each one being right across from each other, symmetrical like ours are, they're asymmetrical, especially for the mostly nocturnal owls. One is up high on the skull and one is down low, one is small and one is big. And they use the feathers on their face like a satellite dish to capture the sounds and direct the sounds back to their ears. If you think of a great gray owl up in the north, non-migratory or staying in the same general range most of its life, in the winter underneath all that snow, they have to be able to hear the animals tunneling under the snow. They can hear an animal a foot under the snow, a football field away. They have incredible hearing. That's very, very important. And it enables a lot of owls to not have to migrate because they're not relying so heavily on their eyesight. Whereas the diurnal raptors, many of the hawks and their allies, have to migrate south because once the snowpack is on the ground, it's very difficult for them to see their prey. Feathers, of course, are very important, and feathers help owls to camouflage. Like in this photograph, there's a couple young great horned owls on this cliff. They blend in perfectly, keep themselves safe. Barred owls like Ollie that you met during the day when they're resting, they're going to snuggle right up to the tree trunk and blend in with all their stripes, disruptive markings, so nobody will bother them. Here's a great example of a screech owl, very well camouflaged in this tree cavity. Feathers on owls tend to be very fluffy and large in relation to their body size, and it helps them to poof out and look really big, scare away photographers and other predators. Their feathers help to insulate them against seasonal changes in weather. And again, many owls stay up north in the wintertime, so they've got to survive some rough seasons. And the feathers on their face, again, are built for catching sounds and directing sounds back to their ear openings. Here's two more examples of some good camouflage. If the little screech owl, if he had his eyes closed, he'd be hard to see. And there's a great gray owl in the other photograph with his head turned around, really well camouflaged. That enables a lot of owls that are nocturnal or more active late in the day or early morning to rest during the daytime. There's a very tiny hidden screech owl in this picture. It's actually easier for us to find owls after dark when they're vocalizing and moving around, because during the day when they're resting, it's pretty hard. Another cool feature about owl feathers is on their leading edge of their flight feathers is a special edge called the fimbriae, where the barbs and the barbules don't hook together and it forms this comb-like edge, and this enables owls to fly silently. As they're flapping and flying and gliding, they don't make any sound, so they can keep their ears tuned into their prey, and their prey doesn't hear them coming. Very unusual. And they've got this velvety edge on the other side of the feather, again, to muffle any sound. So owls really can focus on using their hearing to locate well-hidden prey. They have talons, like all of our raptors do, for catching their prey. 4 toes, 4 talons on each foot. One of them is reversible, so you can see them sitting with 2 toes in front and 2 toes in the back, or 3 toes in front and 1 toe in the back. And they, of course, have that sharp hooked beak for eating their prey. All right, down here locally on the upper Texas coast, there's really four owls that we typically can see. The barn owl, eastern screech owl, the barred, like Ollie that you met earlier, and the great horned. There are 17 different species of owls on the Texas list, so we're very fortunate to have a great variety. So no matter where you live in Texas, there is an owl nearby, probably in your neighborhood or even in your backyard. And they can be told apart very easily by their vocalization. So I'm going to go through the 4 vocalizations for our 4 common ones. Ollie, the barred owl, has a famous call. They say, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for y'all? Who cooks for you? Who cooks for y'all?" Now, if you've ever been to Brazos Bend State Park, you've probably been kept awake at night by the barred owls, because when they have parties, this is what it sounds like. Very talkative. That's the barred owl. The great horn is a little bit more sophisticated. This is what everyone refers to kind of as the hoot owl. The males have a 5-note call. They say, "Who's awake? Me too. Hoo, 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 hoo." So in this recording, you'll hear the female start talking and the male answer. So if you hear a more typical hooting call in your neighborhood after dark, it's probably that of the great horn. They also scream and make some other crazy sounds. The eastern screech owl is a bird that's very common in all of our backyards here in the Houston area, but it doesn't hoot and it doesn't screech. It makes this really neat call. That's their whinny call. Kind of sounds like a horse whinny. And then my favorite is their trill, which I'm playing next. Whoops, make sure the volume's up. This is a very common call that you can hear around your neighborhoods right after dark. Kind of sounds like a video game. So not a screech, not a hoot. Screech owls come in 2 different colorations, this gray and red. This is a screech owl that lives at our Raptor Center here in Houston, that Houston Audubon's Raptor and Education Center. They're very easy to attract with nest boxes. They like ponds, they like bird baths, backyards. They face a lot of dangers living in our urban or suburban areas, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes when I show you some of the owls that live at our Raptor Center. Barn owls. When you think of a barn owl, of course, you think of an owl that lives in a barn. Barn owls are in a completely separate family of owls, the Titanidae, than all the other owls in the world. They have the heart-shaped faces. When their babies hatch, they don't have any down feathers for about a week. So they need to be well protected from weather like rain and wind and things like that. So hundreds of years ago, barn owls would have nested in tree cavities. But as forests were cleared, they quickly caught on to nesting in man-made structures like barns and water towers and other kinds of buildings. And generation after generation of barn owls living in man-made structures, that's really what they seek after. Just like purple martins, seek after man-made houses, chimney swifts nesting in chimneys. And they're incredibly beneficial. One barn owl is eating 4 to 6, sometimes 8 mice every night. And of course, barns are a great place to find mice, so they're a great benefit to the farmers. Now the males become pure white underneath, and I want you to just kind of use your imagination back in the old days before electricity. Your parents tell you to go out and check on the chickens in the barn. It's a dark night out in the country, and you go out to the barn and you open the door and you hear this horrible screaming sound. Really loud, blood-curdling, and something white rushes past you that doesn't make any sound. So you immediately think there's a ghost or a witch, and that's how a lot of folk tales and misunderstandings spread about the barn owls, because white, moving around after dark, not making any noise when they're flying, and the blood-curdling screams. They also, especially the little ones, make a hissing sound. So not a pretty call at all. So that's the sound of the barn owl. Incredibly beneficial birds. But when you hear them, it can be kind of scary. Okay, so you put all those great characteristics together there. Incredible eyesight, incredible hearing, powerful talons, sharp beak, specialized feathers. You have an incredible predator. And we are very fortunate, even in our big cities, in our great city and county parks and private properties and conservation areas, we can see some amazing owls. So I work at Houston Audubon's Raptor and Education Center, where we take care of 14 raptors that cannot go back to living in the wild. And you can come and get a behind the scenes tour and visit with them. We also do photography shoots. And I thought before we meet kind of the star of our show, I'll show you the owls that you can meet if you visit us at our Raptor Center. This is Percy. Percy was found in Bear Creek Park. He had been illegally shot with a pellet gun as a young fledgling screech owl. And he suffered permanent damage to his left eye and his left wing. So he's non-releasable. He's now 14 years old. And he was joined this year with this little guy. This is Pierre hiding. Pierre was found in 2020 after being hit by a car, and he lost his eye. This is obviously a red morph eastern screech owl, 2 males. And people always say, I can't believe how small they are. These are small owls. They weigh about as much as half a can of soda. But they are very common in our backyards and in our parks. They face a lot of dangers from cats, getting hit by cars, especially if they're attracted to the city streetlights, and eating mice that have been poisoned. So just keeping your cat indoors, not using rodenticides, and watching out for them when you're driving after dark are ways to help the little screech owls. Now, we met Ollie before. If you come to the Raptor Center, we have, whoops, let me go back one. We have 2 resident barred owls, Juliet, who's on the left, and Brazos on the right. Now, Juliet was found as a young barred owl on the ground along the Brazos River with a really badly injured right wing. The rescue center couldn't save it. It was very badly broken. They think she fell from her tree nest, from her tree during a bad storm. Barred owls are cavity nesters, but when they get to be a month or so old, the youngsters are very good at climbing, and they like to climb out of that tree hole and spend their time up on the branches. They can't fly yet, but they're really good at climbing. So if you end up falling out of a tree, if you're injured, you're in pretty big trouble if you're a barred owl. Sometimes if they fall out and they're not injured, they can use their talons and their beaks to climb back up into the tree. But unfortunately, Juliet couldn't. And luckily she was rescued, and she now resides at the Raptor Center. And then just last year, we brought in Brazos. He was found in 2020 at Brazos Bend State Park. He was found along one of the roads. We don't know if he was hit by a car or maybe hit a power line, but he had to have a partial amputation of his left wing and is also non-releasable. And they get along really great. They're a cute couple at the center. But then about 6 weeks ago, something really crazy happened. This guy showed up. And this is a barred owl who's obviously outside the enclosure. Here he is up here. And this is Brazos. We've affectionately called him Romeo because he has fallen in love with Juliet. So Brazos is now this third wheel. And Romeo is a wild owl who comes to the Raptor Center every day to visit, doesn't pay admission, so I need to talk to him about that. But he is eating a few of the rats that roam around, so I guess I'll let it slide. And he comes and he visits Juliet every day, and they sit next to, he's on the outside, she's on the inside, and they call and they talk, and poor Brazos is left all alone. He doesn't know what's going on, but it's kind of cool to see them. This is Romeo looking in to part of the enclosure where Juliet was, and that's Juliet's sign behind him. And he just hangs out 4 feet off the ground. He's part of the tour now. He's one of the stops when we do our tours at the Raptor Center. He's part of it. Need to make him his own sign, which would be kind of cool. He thinks he owns the place. And this is Brazos. Hey everyone, so this is Brazos here at Houston Audubon's Raptor and Education Center. He's our newest barred owl. He's a friend to our other barred owl. Her name is Juliet. Brazos came to us from Brazos Bend State Park, where he was found along one of the park roads with a badly injured left wing and had to have a partial wing amputation, so he can no longer fly. So he resides here at our center. He's a very talkative barred owl. I know. And loves to call and give the traditional barred owl hoots throughout the day and in the evening. You can see they're called barred owls because of the stripes on their feathers like bars. He only weighs a little under 2 pounds, but you know, if you can see how big their wingspan is. And I want to show you something really cool up close on Brazos here. Obviously, this is an owl with a round face, dark brown eyes. And we talked about their hearing. Their ears are located behind their eyes. And it's a huge ear hole. He's listening to the blue jays right now that are fussing. We have a wild barred owl that hangs out here. Nothing to cooperate. So that's Brazos, and the blue jays come and yell at Romeo, and it's this great. You have to come and see. It's really amazing. We also have barn owls. This is Getty. And Getty and his sister Alex now reside at the Raptor Center. And they are a little bit different in that they came to us from the Baton Rouge Zoo. They are captive bred barn owls. They were actually raised in captivity at the Cincinnati Zoo and worked for 15 years at a zoo in Chicago called the Lincoln Park Zoo. Then they were moved to the Baton Rouge Zoo, and now we are very thankful that they are here at our facility. And this is a photo taken by a guy who came to one of our photography shoots. He captured this wonderful moment with Getty. Getty's sister Alex, they're both 19. Alex is completely blind, and Getty, the brother, takes care of Alex by calling to her, letting her know where the platforms and perches are in their enclosure, and he taps his feet. Because they're both fully flighted, they can get around. But because Alex is totally blind, she needs a little help. So it's really neat to see this relationship between brother and sister owl, and how he kind of dotes on her and takes care of her in captivity. It's a pretty neat relationship. And then kind of our star of the show that everyone loves to meet up close. Again, this is a photo taken at one of our photo shoots that we do for photographers, amateur and professional, people with cell phones, people with all big giant lenses come and they can capture some really neat shots of the birds. This is Simon, our great horned owl, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can introduce you guys to Simon. So hang on just a second. Let me grab her. She's become quite used to Zooming these days since COVID hit. Her name is Simon, but she is a female great horned owl, and she was found alongside of a highway in Wyoming. I have a friend who's a great rehabilitator up in Wyoming, and the folks who found Simon, named her Simon, didn't know it was a female great horn, but they had to drive 8 hours across the state to get her to a rescue center. She had a broken leg and a broken wing. She went through surgery and rehabbed really well, but her wing is slightly crooked, so she can't fly well enough to be released back out into the wild. So she lives at our center with our other great horn, who is next year will turn 30 years old. They can have a really long life in captivity. And I want to show you guys her huge talons. They can exert over 500 pounds of pressure per square inch with these talons. Great horned owls are the #1 predator of skunks in North America. They also hunt for lots of rabbits and young raccoons, snakes, small children, mice and rats, all kind. I was kidding about small children, just kidding. Small children taste terrible. But they can hunt for some pretty large prey. They can capture and kill animals that weigh 3 times what they weigh. So they are really a top predator. And they have figured out how to, live in the urban setting. We have them resident in Houston, in our city and county parks, sometimes in our neighborhoods. They nest in the wintertime. They're one of the first birds to start nesting every year. I monitor a nest out in Katy, Texas, and the female uses a flower box on the side of a house, and she lays her eggs usually around December 15th every year. So it's the middle of winter, but they're such top predators that they can raise their kids in the wintertime when they're young, when the young great horns are leaving the nest. It's a great time for them to start learning how to hunt on their own, because that's when a lot of young mammals are being born, like rabbits and squirrels. So they get some easy pickings and animals that are a little bit easier to go hunting for. And by the time summer rolls around, they're done. Owls tend to get real quiet in the summertime. And then usually in October, you'll start hearing them call, setting up their territories again, going back to the same nest site. They'll use old hawk nests, eagle nests, abandoned buildings, flower boxes. They're not real picky, and they'll go back to the same area, sometimes the same nest if it's available, every year for nesting. Get back together with their mate. They mate for life. If they do lose their mate, they'll very quickly, or try to quickly, find a new mate. Because really takes 2 to raise their kids. Huge yellow eyes, incredible night vision, about 15,000 feathers on their body. So if she gets a little bit warmer in here under the lights, she'll pant. Birds don't sweat, don't have sweat glands. She weighs a little over 3 pounds. And again, just an incredible creature. And when you see one in the wild, it's so special. but they're out there. It just takes listening. Again, in the wintertime, I think that's one of the reasons why they're associated with Halloween, because that's when they start calling. So for the owls, Halloween is actually Valentine's Day. That's when they're calling, setting up their territories, wooing their mates, reestablishing those relationships. Has nothing to do with Halloween, the way we think about it. But because people would hear them calling and had long associated them with witches and spirits and ghosts, they kind of got in on the bandwagon of Halloween. And now, of course, they're a very popular decoration at that time of year, which is great for all of us owl enthusiasts out there. So I hope you guys will want to come and visit the Raptor Center and visit all these guys and many more really cool birds. And there are some easy things we can do to help out our birds, like I talked about, putting up nest boxes for many species like screech owls and barred owls, keeping cats indoors, not using pesticides, protecting and conserving green space. That goes a long way to help out these very important beneficial birds. So Celeste, it was great. Did we have any questions on Facebook?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome. I'm so glad Simon could join us. So Lucy says hi and asked how Percy is. I'm assuming that's
Percy, they all have their own fan club, which is really cool. You can do what do they call it? A special adoption, and you get a certificate in their photo. And Percy is very popular with Screech Owl. He's doing great, 14 years old. They can live a long life in captivity. Great horned owls can live upwards of 40 years, and Percy's now 14 or 15. So he's doing good. He's not really enamored with Pierre, our new Screech Owl. So they kind of sit at opposite ends of the enclosure, but you know, they tolerate each other. So.
All right. And Kenny asked if short-eared owls are common in our area.
I would say no. In the wintertime, I think you really have to get out to the coastal marshes like Chambers County. Anahuac National Wildlife Refuge is sometimes a good place, or Brazoria. eBird is a great way to kind of see where people are seeing short ears, but they're a bird that we would see in the winter, but you really have to go out to those prairie, coastal marsh areas to see them. I know that people were seeing them last winter. I didn't get a chance to go out. When I was out, I didn't see any. But they're definitely a special owl to see. They nest on the ground. They're kind of the owl version of the northern harrier. A cool bird.
Cool. Can I ask what Simon is doing now? I see her like throat moving.
Oh, so when she's panting and cooling off, her throat moves, her skin is moving, so her feathers move also. So that just helps to keep her cool under these lights. She's got about 15,000 feathers, and they don't have any bare skin. So their feathers go all the way down to where their talons, their nails are starting. Owls that live, there's many owls that have bare feet, bare toes that help to release heat, but these guys are fully feathered. Great horned owls are found all across North America in just about every habitat, and they tend to stay in their habitat all year long, so they have to survive some pretty harsh weather up north. So panting and sharing bad breath is their way of cooling off.
Cool. Do you have any tips for seeing owls in the wild?
Well, I would say that, going out right after dark in your neighborhood and listening. We're getting, it's getting into late spring and summer, so they tend to get a lot quieter at this time of year. So starting in the fall, right after dark, just, spend time in your neighborhood. You'll hear the screech owls, great horn potentially. There are many organizations that do owl prowls in the wintertime, and I bet there's opportunities to join an owl prowl no matter where you're living. If you're in the Houston area, we offer owl prowls, and I know some of the other parks and our partners do also at a variety of locations. So that's a really good way. Then you get to really hear their call as it is out in the wild. But they're out there during the day. It's just they're being really camouflaged and quiet.
Yeah, so that kind of leads into my last question, which is, do you have any upcoming events or anything that you want to plug?
Well, our owl crowds won't start up again until the fall. We are always offering our behind the scenes tours or just have people come out and visit the Raptor Center. Kind of gearing, our education department right now is gearing up for summer camp. If you're interested at all in photographing these birds, we do have fun at our Raptor photo shoots, and you can use your cell phone, you can use your $20,000 camera. So just check the Houston Audubon website and we'll get you hooked in somehow.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Marianne. This was great. Thanks for answering all of our questions and joining us today. Yeah. All right. Bye. Bye, Simon.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Bye.